It is December 2nd, 2025. Jason Schreier of Bloomberg Businessweek walks into an office in Marina del Rey, California. Jason Schreier is not a games journalist. He doesn't review games, he doesn't cover announcements, he doesn't go to E3 and tell you what looks cool. Jason Schreier is an investigative reporter who covers the game industry the way a federal prosecutor covers organized crime. He broke the story on Naughty Dog's crunch culture during The Last of Us 2. He exposed CD Projekt Red's lies to investors and employees during the development of Cyberpunk 2077. He reported on the sexual harassment culture of Riot Games. His Blizzard coverage contributed to a federal investigation and a $54 million settlement. Ubisoft blacklisted him. Bethesda blacklisted him. When Jason Schreier knocks on your door, it is never because of the game. It is because something underneath the game is broken. He was sitting in the office of Yacht Club Games, across from the founders of a small independent game studio. They were explaining the situation, the stakes, what it would mean if the game didn't sell well. The room was quiet except for the conversation, and then the conference room TV started smoking, acrid fumes entering the air. Let's go back to 2011. Yacht Club Games was founded in 2011 by 6 people who left a studio called WayForward Technologies. WayForward is a legitimate company. They made the game with the Half Genie hero. They made Contra 4, Double Dragon Neon. These are real games that were received relatively well. But WayForward was also, by that point, a large developer. And large developers work a certain way. You make what you're told to make. You ship on someone else's timeline, and you execute someone else's vision. Sean Velasco, David D'Angelo, Nick Wozniak, Ian Flood, Aaron Pellon, and Ian McDowell didn't want that anymore. They wanted to make their own games, on their own terms, with their own vision, without any compromises to said vision. So they left. 6 people. A small office in Valencia, California, an industrial business park 30 miles north of downtown Los Angeles. And they started making a game about a knight with a shovel. In March of 2013, Yacht Club Games launched a Kickstarter for Shovel Knight. Their goal was $75,000. I want you to sit with that number for a second. $75,000 for 5 developers in the greater Los Angeles metropolitan area to make a complete video game. They had their own formula for what development actually costs, $10,000 per month per employee. Salary plus expenses. That's the number for you. Insurance and whatnot. 5 people with $10,000 each means $50,000 a month. $75,000 is 6 weeks of runway. They set a Kickstarter goal that could fund 6 weeks of development on a game that they expected over a year to make in Southern California. This is not a company that is good with money. Great at making money, not necessarily good at keeping it. I want you to remember this fact because this moment right here is the beginning of the entire story, and you'll see these types of business decisions made over and over and over again. But they did raise $311,000, 14,749 backers, 4 times the goal, and every stretch goal unlocked. It was like a miracle. It still wasn't enough. Do the math yourself. $311,000, 5 people, $50,000 a month in operating costs. That is 6 months of runway, maybe 7 if they're careful. They were not careful. They were generous. They cut their own salaries in half, roughly $30,000 a year before taxes, well below the average for employees anywhere in the country, let alone Southern California. It still wasn't enough, and by March of 2014, the money was gone. And here is the part that most people do not know, is that when the money ran out, they didn't stop. They cut the expenses down to the absolute essentials, electricity and internet, and then they worked for 5 months without pay while cutting into their personal savings just to keep the lights on. 5 months without a paycheck to finish a game that they'd already run out of money to make. Shovel Knight shipped on June of 26, 2014. 180,000 copies in the first month, 300,000 by December of 2014, and critical acclaim across the board. A love letter to NES-era platformers that somehow managed to be better than most of the games it was paying tribute to. Shovel Knight became a cultural institution, for crying out loud. A crossover character in Bloodstained, Rivals of Aether, Blaster Master Zero, which was a remake of another NES game, and a spirit in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. Eventually, 3 million copies sold. 5 months in Industrial Park in Valencia for 5 months without pay, and they sold 3 million copies. The money was real. Yacht Club Games had won the indie rat race. Here's where it gets interesting. Remember those stretch goals? The ones that unlocked when they blew past their Kickstarter target. 3 additional playable campaigns, starring different characters from the Shovel Knight universe. Now, a reasonable studio looks at those stretch goals and delivers something reasonable. Bonus content. A few extra hours. Something that satisfies the obligation without consuming the company. You can play as Luigi or Proto Man. Yacht Club Games looked at those stretch goals and decided that playable campaign meant complete game as large and polished as the original, given to every existing owner for free. Nobody asked them to do that. The backers paid $15 in 2013, 14,000 of them. They were expecting bonus content. They were not expecting 3 additional complete games. But that's exactly what they made. Plague of Shadows, 12 months, 9 people, $1 million in development costs, and it was free. Spectre of Torment, 15 months, 16 people, $1.5 million, free. King of Cards, 18 months, 16 people, $2.5 million, and they added a full card game called Joustus, and a platform fighter called Shovel Knight Showdown for free. $8 million in content given away to people who paid $15 6 years after the original Kickstarter ended. The Shovel Knight Kickstarter campaign, which ran for 30 days in 2013, was not fully fulfilled until December of 2019. That is not a typo. Meanwhile, the studio was growing. And here is something that doesn't get talked about enough. Yacht Club Games also decided in 2016 to become an indie publisher. While making free DLC campaigns, while growing the team, they also added a publishing arm. Their first published title was Azure Striker Gunvolt Striker Pack. Their second was Cyber Shadow in 2021. Cyber Shadow sold 85,000 copies. They were now operating 3 separate business models simultaneously: developer, sequel content studio, and publisher. And the overhead was real. By this point, the studio had grown to 25 people, and it cost $5 million a year to run. For context, their annual revenue in 2025 was $789,000, and it costed $5 million to run. It's October 6, 2025. 3 weeks before Mina the Hollower's Halloween launch date, Yacht Club Games announces an indefinite delay. Now you understand why. This is not a story about a delayed video game. This is a story about the studio that made one of the defining indie games of the decade, won the game, as in the rat race, and then spent a decade making every wrong financial decision available to them, not out of malice, not out of incompetence, but out of a genuine belief that they could become something bigger than what they were. They couldn't afford the goal that they set themselves in 2013. They could not afford the DLC obligations they volunteered for. They could not afford the office, the teams, the publisher arm, the 3D engine, or the ambition. And yet, here they are. They're still standing. 15 people, they are going fully remote, and Mina the Hollower will gone gold. Sean Velasco told Schreier that it's make or break for sure. 500,000 copies, golden. 200,000, really, really great. 100,000, not so good. Mina the Hollower ships May 29th, 2026. $19.99. The studio that couldn't fund 6 weeks of development with their Kickstarter goal, that gave away $8 million in free content, that paid Marina Del Rey rent for an office that they could not legally enter, that built a 3D game that nobody asked for in secret for 5 years, is now charging $20 for their comeback. Because that's just who they are. That's who they've always been. Generous to a fault. Literally to a fault. The same broke deadline that forced them to ship Shovel Knight in 2014 is forcing them to ship Mina the Hollower in 2026. The money is gone. The game has to come out. The math is the same. The only difference is the number of copies they need to sell to survive. And hey, you know what? It's probably going to sell great. These people are talented at making games. Absurdly talented. And that's the problem, right? These people are really good at making games, but they're not good at being a studio, right? The story of Yacht Club Games is not greed. Nobody at that studio got rich and stopped caring. Nobody cashed out and left. The founders who could have retired on Shovel Knight money stayed. They reinvested. They tried to build something lasting. The problem wasn't the fact that they were ambitious. The problem was that their ambition was always larger than their financial reality. From the $75,000 Kickstarter goal, to the Marina Del Rey office, to the $20 price point on a game that took 6 years to make. They have never charged once what they were worth. And they are about to find out if the market will save them anyway. I'm the Art Economist. We'll see you guys next time. Peace out.